Good morning. Two people watching, five thumbs up. Ooh, that's a little bit that math is a little bit too optimistic for me, but I guess a lot of people must like poetry. So yeah, today I can't remember when's the first time I actually sort of a poem that wasn't, I don't know, something that was assigned to me to do like in school or something. But I do remember when I wrote something that I didn't even necessarily consider poetry, um, and it got a lot of positive feedback, and I really felt like, "Oh, okay, wow. This is there's power in being able to write down words in such a way that, um, you're communicating a feeling that other people can relate to." And so that was when I was in either 5th or 6th grade. I had had to switch schools between 4th and 5th grade, so I went to one school from kindergarten through 4th grade, and then I went to a different school from 5th through 8th grade, and then I went to a different school, actually 2 schools sort of simultaneously from 9th through 12th grade. And, so we moved between 4th and 5th grade when I was 9 or 10 years old, and we were we moved probably about, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles away, but it was a different zip code, a different city, a different, type of school, and so when I was fairly new to this new school, I think it must have been in 5th grade, um, I would look out the window and I could see that they were demolishing this old football stadium because the new school that I went to was, like, right adjacent to the campuses of 2 universities. One was Loyola University in New Orleans, the other was Tulane University. And Tulane University had this, sort of historic old football stadium that they were demolishing, and I guess they were gonna build up another athletic facility of some kind or something, um, and I don't know, I started writing about that stadium just sitting in my desk in the classroom, and again, this was something that was assigned to me. Um, but whatever I wrote, and I certainly don't still have a copy of it at this time. Whatever I wrote got the teacher's attention so much that I remember her like sort of sending positive feedback to my parents, and my parents being like super proud of me and all this kind of stuff. And it's like my parents didn't usually get super proud of me. Something had happened a few years before, like when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, where I had won an essay contest, but that was definitely prose. That was not poetry. Um, so I mean, I always had confidence in my writing, but I guess the whole poetry thing was not something that like either one of my parents would have necessarily exposed me to poetry, or neither one of them wrote poetry themselves. I remember one time when I was a teenager, my mom started writing some kind of screenplay or something, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, so from that point onward, I guess I had confidence in both my um, prose writing and some confidence in my poetry. But I always leaned more toward prose for whatever reason. And so when it was 8th grade and it was time to change schools for high schools because the school I went to ended at 8th grade, I had a lot of different options, and there were a lot of choices, and there were a lot of like expectations, and also some constraints about where I could and couldn't go to high school. Um, my dad had wanted me to go to this all girls Catholic high school that was fairly close to where I lived. Fun fact, it was, like, directly adjacent to where, to McMain, which is where Lil Wayne went for a little while, but he's younger than me, so I wouldn't have been there at the same time. But anyway, so I was supposed to go to Ursuline, and, we did all the application and everything, and I had a seat at Ursuline should I want it. But Catholic schools cost money, and it's not that we didn't have enough money, it's just that no matter how much money you have, it's always good to not waste it. And so one of my one of my friends at my current school, her sister was at this public school that was a test school. You had to take an exam to get into it, and people who went there, really had a lot of a lot of op- a lot more opportunities for college and things like that than people who went to this all girls school. I mean, this all girls school had at one point been like literally a funneling school for, to become a nun. And it wasn't like that anymore, but it was more like a funneling school to, you know, maybe go to college, maybe not, like type of thing. And whereas Ben Franklin High School, which is the high school I went to and ultimately went to and completed the 4 years there, it just has a completely different culture, a completely different outlook and all that. And then also, in addition to that, I was eligible to go to the public arts school. And so I auditioned for 2 different programs at the art school, which back then was really unusual. These days, I think it's not quite as unusual, but back then I auditioned for both the theater program and the writing program. And I got into both. And I still to this day don't quite know why I chose the theater program over the writing program at that initial point when I was starting in there. But I did, and I started in the theater class. So it was a half day at the regular school at Ben Franklin, which is the exam school, and then it was a half day at the audition school, NOCA. And after probably maybe a semester in the theater program, if that, I just decided that, the transition from elementary to high school was too much and just different reasons that I was just gonna stick with Ben Franklin. So I quit the theater program at NOCA, and then I did my freshman, my sophomore, and my junior year at Ben Franklin. Now, while I was at Ben Franklin, I had an opportunity to take electives in creative writing. I founded the literary magazine at that high school called the Riverbend Review, which still exists to this day, 40 years later. Yeah, gosh, 40 years later. They had reached out to me a few years ago. I think they were doing some kind of an anniversary thing, and I was supposed to participate with it. But since I live in Massachusetts now, and that's down in New Orleans, I wasn't able to fully participate. But yeah, so I was like a co-founder of this literary magazine. And, in these writing classes, I wrote some poems, and some of them were okay, but I still felt like I expressed myself better in paragraph form rather than in verse form. And I still to this day do. So is there a place for poetry? Absolutely. I think um, the most significant impact poetry has had on my life is when uh, poems can be set to music. And in fact, my little sister, who passed away in 2017, she, after I left and went away to college, she had access to a bunch of my poems that I had left behind. And I don't, I know she must have missed me a lot because I was a lot older than her, and I'd been like a pretty much a primary caretaker for her until I left to go to college. But anyway, as she grew into her tweens and teens, she got into a band and she wrote a song based like using one of my poems as its lyrics, and then she put it to music. And it actually was a song that got her, some positive attention in the music scene down in New Orleans back in the back in the 90s, I guess, back in the mid 90s when she was a teenager. Um, and so, yeah, I think that there is power in poetry. I think there's beauty in poetry. Um, I I don't know what it is about me that whenever I decide to write something that rhymes, I really find it just makes me cringe even when I read it. Even if other people have given me good feedback on it, I hate that sort of expectation of what the next word is gonna be that rhymes. But having said that, I do appreciate cleverly crafted verse, and whether that's in music or in other formats. So, yeah, I guess to wrap this little part of the story up, I would say let's take back poetry. I think that poetry has been weaponized in some creative ways over the last several months, and I don't really want to dwell on that too much. I think that, like Jamie told me that she and someone else were writing poems that were a little bit edgy, let's say, to cope with trauma. And I think that I think everyone has a right to use their voice, and if someone chooses to use their voice in rhymed verse, that is absolutely their right. If they repeatedly choose to use their voice in rhymed verse that is pretty clearly directed at me, I'd say maybe just pick up the phone or shoot an email over and let me know what you want me to stop doing, so we don't keep, like, having this transatlantic poetry slam. But again, you do you, boo. So let's see. Away from keyboard listening, no worries, no worries. Yeah, I mean, there's 4 people watching, 5 thumbs up. Again, I don't know how that maths. I guess people were waiting for this and haven't shown up yet. But yeah, I mean, yeah, transatlantic poetry slam. Yep. So, and I'm gonna say the other party in that is gonna always win that transatlantic poetry slam because poetry seems to be like essentially their life, you know. And poetry to me is a very small part of my life. Although I will say this, I have been consistently attending this Tuesday morning writing group that isn't exclusively poetry, but usually the writing prompt is something, some sort of verse, and then we can write whatever we want. So typically we get this writing prompt, and then I write in paragraph form. And gosh, I know last week whatever I wrote, I haven't yet. Like normally after the class, normally I write things out in like freehand, and then after the class, I'll type it up and send it to the instructor or the facilitator, as she calls herself. And then sometimes they like ask, "Can we publish this in our little newsletter or whatever?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, who cares?" But but I don't know where I put that poem from last week, so I don't have access to any poems right now to read. And I've done that before on live streams, and I've really kind of regretted it. I mean, people have begged me to do it, and I've regretted it just because it just fuels this whole narrative that I'm trying to compete with somebody or I'm trying to copy somebody. Like even just this morning before I hit the live button, I'm looking at comments that came in on something completely unrelated, and somebody's like, you think of BJ as your fairy godmother, she's going to make everything go away for you. How on earth could that even be? I mean, I hope that was just a joke. As a joke, I guess it's nominally funny, but no, BJ is not my fairy godmother. In fact, I'm well old enough to be BJ's mother. If anything, I would look out for people of BJ's age. BJ's right around my daughter's age. No, I'm not. Nobody's my fairy godmother, and I'm not looking to be anybody's fairy godmother. I think that's ridiculous. But what I will say is that, and this has nothing to do with poetry, but it's just something that's happened in the last 12 to 18 hours. People are saying, why did you do this? Why did you do this? When, BJ would not approve of this. I know BJ would not approve of this. I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm not affiliated with BJ. I'm not. She has her channel. I have mine. She has 200,000 subscribers. I have 200, if that. You're not to sound like Brennan, but you're comparing apples to oranges and you're getting pears. Like there's no correlation between me and BJ. I am one of 200,000 people that happen to support her. More, I'm sure, 200,000 subscribers. And there's no causation. Like what BJ does might sort of directly or indirectly influence what I might say on a given day. And I'm certain that what I do in no way influences what she does on a given day. I'm certain of that. So this imaginary thing, I don't know if it goes back to people confusing Nola Mama, which is one of my handles, with Nola Lola. I don't know. But there's nothing BJ does is because of anything I did, and nothing I do is because of anything BJ did. There might be some narrative similarities in things we both care about, like freedom for Dahlia, like where is Dia, who apparently got arrested a couple months ago on the exact same day that Lima finally let Jamie supposedly talk to Dahlia. Coincidence? I don't know. But I just put the stuff out there as it falls into my lap, because I don't want, if something happens to me, I don't want stuff to get buried with me. Okay. So Jamie gave me a few things yesterday. She gave me this thing that she had been sitting on for a couple of months, that Dahlia had been arrested in Orange County. So I'm sorry, that Dia had been arrested in Orange County, California, back on March 30th. Okay. And it was for petty theft, I believe. And so that is probably working its way through the justice system right now, which means that if there's anybody out there on the ground in that area that can go dig up some information, either from the news reports or from the court docket or whatever, about whether or not Dia will actually show up or is currently incarcerated, or what was the outcome of that whole thing, that's good information to have, just because we know we're fighting for something that actually might have a happy ending. Because if one or both of these girls are, out of the country and we have no way of finding them, and or if something tragic happens to either one of them and they pass away, well, then all this free Dahlia, free Dia, all that is going to be for nothing, because there's no one left to free. But so seeing that news, as as sad as it is when anyone gets arrested, the good thing about getting arrested is you get the benefits of the criminal justice system. Whereas what we saw in the body cam footage is they chose not to arrest Dahlia for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to be more work for them. Two, they probably want to keep their conviction rate up. And it was very clear that Linda wasn't going to cooperate in prosecution. I mean, they did end up charging Dahlia later, but that day they just wanted to get her in the handcuffs so they could get her in the hospital, so they could just get rid of the problem without her having any substantial rights as she would have in a criminal proceeding. So yeah, how does this tie back to poetry? I mean, Dahlia writes some poetry. Dahlia paints. Dahlia does all kinds of things. I mean, she's like a Renaissance girl. Diadema, I don't really know. I mean, it must be hard to be a twin. Like when you think about famous twins, I guess, we have the Olsen twins. I can't think of any other ones that directly come to mind. But, and it's not that those girls were famous per se, but they were certainly on a trajectory to continue to gain credibility and recognition for their craft, and to hopefully continue to produce content that was going to have an audience and all that, I mean, and something happened along the way. And other people have been sending me things, or sort of putting things out there that I've seen in the last few days of, again, just kind of putting some dates together and putting these timelines together. So I also put out APPA's timeline. Well, I mean, this is a timeline from October 7th of last year. I'm sure it's been updated since then, but I don't have access to that. I put that out there because she told me that, I mean, in spite of her current allegiance to Steph for whatever reason, she told me that she wanted it to be in the Bam and Dahlia server, because the whole point of the timeline was, A, it was a group effort that a lot of different people contributed to, and B, getting it in front of as many eyes as possible was going to encourage more people to correct it, contribute additional things to it, and use it toward an investigation that's going to hopefully bear something fruitful, excuse me, as far as justice for one or more of the people whose lives have been irrevocably altered by Lima. Um, so yeah, and I just want to take a moment to say another reason why I published that video yesterday where all people are caring about is some other woman who's on, who's in Steph's coven now, who Michelle decided to release not just my address, but this other person's address to this Carney cult. People are getting all angry at me, like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why not? I mean, I didn't put that woman's address out there. Steph gave it to Michelle. Michelle gave it to Jamie, Bryn, C Files, etc. Okay. So should I have written a poem about it? Maybe. Wasn't worth my time. All I did was Jamie sends me something. I take a look at it and I'm like, okay, this is affecting more than just me. I'm not going to sit on this. I'm going to put it out there. If people object to it, they know how to they know how to complain to YouTube and everything. That video might still be up right now. YouTube might have taken it down. Fine. But at least I didn't like sequester it away as something private when it's something that happened to not just me, but a group of people. So, I mean, had I known at that time that I wasn't the only one that was being targeted by the group, things might have been different, because at the time I just thought it was only me, but apparently it wasn't only me. Yeah. Anyway. So I missed my poetry group yesterday. And the reason I missed the poetry group is because I had Jamie on the phone and she was starting to give me things like this link or this information about Dahlia Diaz arrest and this information about the Discord. And what else that thing proved is that I had a feeling that not only was Steph's Discord server filled with people with cross purposes, but once I started telling people in Steph's server about this recovery server that I was and technically still am in, although I rarely go into it, it had about 400 people at that time, just under 500. Now it's got like 800 or something, 8 months later. But anyway, I told a few people who were struggling with alcohol, I told them about this recovery program that I do that's medically based and that we had a Discord for it. And so one of the people that was in that conversation that I published yesterday had gone into that Discord, looked me up and said, yeah, she's in there, but she said this about herself and that's not true. And she said this about herself and that's not true. It's like, I've been telling the people who manage that Discord for a while, like, I had to quit even being involved in that group because I knew there were people from Steph's group that were infiltrating that group. And now I have the proof that it wasn't in my head. So I'm putting proof out there to back up everything that I've been yelling and screaming and crying and flipping out about, quite frankly, which was that Steph's Discord server was a cesspool and that anyone who was exposed to those kind of people due to Steph's inability to manage her Discord is a victim, whether you had negative ramifications or not. There's nothing different about me and anyone else that was in there for the right purpose, except that perhaps I've spoken up about it more. But I can tell you, they weren't just investigating me. They weren't just posting pictures of where I live. They were doing this to many other people in that server. And the ultimate goal, I believe, was to try to split it into two groups that were both anti-BJ, Steph's Little Coven and the Carney Army. And those two channels both existed before all this. And one of them has grown by about maybe 10% during all this. That would be Steph's channel, grew from about just under 3,000 to 3,300 or whatever. And the other one grew from about 1,000 to now, I believe that Carney channel is up to 4,000 or 5,000 now. And then, oh God, Bridget, I'm so done with you. I really am. I'm not going to block you. I'm just going to ignore you. Okay. So, Kaleidoscope, if there's anything important Bridget is saying, can you put it and I'll read it from you? I'm done with this person. I gave them the chance to call me and then they're doing all this kind of effery. I'm done with you, Bridget. Okay. So yeah, so I was not the only intended victim. I was probably the easiest victim for a few reasons. And I was also the most vocally unfuckwithable victim because A, I'm not a victim. And B, I will fight back when people come for me. I mean, I'm sure Bridget has that little video on her little montage of everything where she's doing her 7-part podcast about me. Um, if you come for me, I will fight you. Yes, I will. I'm not a pacifist. Never claimed to be. If you come for people more vulnerable than me, I will fight even harder. So just cut it out. Quit your gangs. They are gangs, Bridget. They are gangs. They target individuals and they try to threaten. Oh, good. Message retracted. There you go. There you go. Censor yourself. Quit telling on yourself, Bridget. Just go focus on your little podcast and send me a link when it's out, okay? All right. Well, there's 4 people watching. I only see Kaleidoscope and Bully Bridget in the chat. Bridget the Bully. I'm just gonna call them Bridget the Bully from now on. So yeah, I don't want to keep people here. I'm sure people have better things to do than watch me on the internet. But yeah, tomorrow, I guess we're talking about me, myself, and journalism. And then Friday, law school. So it's kind of like a progression. So poetry was kind of like my high school obsession. Oh, and then I did end up going back into that arts program for my senior year. So I started in theater in my freshman year, didn't do anything for sophomore, junior year. And then I went back and I reapplied and they're like, this is highly unusual. A, we usually don't admit people to do programs in the first place. B, we usually don't admit incoming seniors in the first place. And C, I'm going on sabbatical. It's going to be a different teacher and da 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 da. So I guess fine, we'll let you in. But this is your second lucky break, and you better not mess with it. So I really focused on that poetry and creative writing for my senior year, and then I got published in the literary magazine for that program as well, and that was really cool. And then I went on to journalism school, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. So yeah, I'm just trying to give some background and context for all these, all these people who are saying that I'm inconsistent or that I'm making things up. I'm not. Do you want my high school transcripts? I've got them. You want my college transcripts? I've got them. Send an email to bamandahlia@gmail.com. I'll send you whatever verification you need that I am who I say I am. So yeah, I missed yesterday's poetry group, and I still haven't even done my sort of follow-up work for the prior week's poetry group. So I do need to focus on that today. But I am, as I've been saying for the last 3 weeks, I am in this 12-week reversing parental alienation group. So I think next week I'm really going to try to focus on topics that are related to that. Like one day I might focus on how I became alienated from my own father and then how I resolved that. And then I might focus on how I became alienated from my daughter and how I resolved that. And then I might focus on how I resolved it. And now it's sort of unresolved, but she and I kind of come back into each other's lives at different times. So I'm not too worried about my daughter because I know she's at least in touch with my mom and stuff. And then how I became alienated from my son, which is like an extremely sad story. So So I might like kind of focus on that kind of stuff just to deflect from this whole BJ narrative. Um, because honestly, I I have supported BJ long before Lima was a blip on the radar. I mean, Lima might have been a blip on other people's radar. I'm not saying I supported BJ like before. I supported BJ before I even knew what soft white underbelly was. I supported BJ because I saw her during the Free Britney uh, era. I saw her just like on Reuters, and I recognized her accent, and I was like, oh, I actually thought she was this girl that I know that lives out in LA. Sometimes, I mean, she's back and forth from Louisiana to LA. Like I thought that was her, and so I kind of was like tuning in, and I'm like looking, and I'm squinting, and I'm like, no, 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 this girl's like super tall, but otherwise they could be like sisters or something. And then I was just listening to what she had to say, and I heard her saying she was a lawyer and she lived in New Jersey and all this, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I just followed her because I was following, like Emily D. Baker at the time and everything, but I hadn't heard of this person. And so I followed her, and I just really, really liked not only the substance of what she had to say, but I liked the style, and I liked sort of the cultural references that she had being from Louisiana as well and living in the Northeast. It's not a unique experience, but it's definitely something that um, it's not every day you encounter somebody that can kind of understand what that experience is like to kind of grow up in one completely different type of a culture and then to be a young adult in a very, very, very different kind of culture and to try to make your way. So I had a lot of respect for her and I had a lot of admiration for her and I still do. And it just makes me sad that all of that was jeopardized by this, this shout out to some random other channel, and this person's deciding as a result of that shout out not to just take the win and run with it, but to come back into this person's community and be like, here, email me to join a Discord, email me to join a Discord, and from Texas on the same thing, and to just when BJ needed her longtime supporters to stay on the same page and to hold the line and to just not cause any trouble, all of a sudden I'm in the midst of all this trouble. And the further I try to back out of the trouble, the more trouble seems to come at me. And I just, I don't think there's any way, even if I wanted to, I don't think there's any way. I'm not built to have done things any differently. Okay. The only way I could have possibly avoided this is if I just ignored them, all of them, in BJ's chat back then and just never even logged into a Discord. Never even sent an email about a Discord. Like, because I was hating on Discord long before this. And had I known that BJ hated on Discord, I would have never done it either. But I just didn't know. Like, I really thought like, oh shit, like you're going to miss the train on this if you don't join the Discord. Like, that's really what I thought. I don't know where I got that sadly mistaken assumption, but that's really what I thought. And so what I do these days is I typically don't even look at the chat. Like if I'm watching live, I just keep it on full screen so I'm not seeing what's going on in the chat. And if I'm watching after the fact, I definitely don't go back and look at the chat because people will often send me like little clips like, look at what so-and-so did and look what they said over here. That is so distracting to me. Like I want to hear every word of what the content creator has to say, whether that's BJ or anyone else. And the chat is where the drama happens and the comments is where the drama happens. And, what does that have to do with poetry? Not really much, but I think we have, we've been live for 35 minutes or so 34 minutes. And it doesn't seem like anybody has too much that they want to, address on poetry or any other subjects. So I'll give it another few minutes. Oh, and by the way, as I was saying with this whole recovery thing, I'm drinking what looks like perhaps a Bloody Mary, but there is no alcohol in it. I like to take this organic low sodium tomato juice that I buy at my little local grocery store. And I like to mix it in with things like horseradish and garlic and pepper and stuff. And I find it to be quite refreshing. And so when people like back then, back in like November, were like, look, she's drinking, she's drinking, she's drinking, she's drinking. You don't know what the hell I'm drinking. I don't know what the hell you're smoking. It's not my business. Why are people so freaking concerned with me? Oh, here comes someone. Okay, well, it's Kaleidoscope. Yum, that sounds good. I don't have much to add other than I hope you have a wonderful day. Same to you, Kaleidoscope. I really appreciate you for being here. I really, truly appreciate you for being here because you always keep things on the up and up. And even when you're sort of making some pointed suggestions toward me, a lot of times I ignore people's suggestions, but I always take yours into consideration because I know you are coming at this from a very deeply sincere place. And unfortunately, there aren't that many people left around that are still focusing on the things I'm focusing on from a sincere point of view. It seems like everybody's got an agenda at this point. Just fine. It's not surprising given everything's that's kind of come to pass. But yeah, no, I really truly appreciate you, Kaleidoscope. And I just want to wish everybody a blessed and beautiful day. And maybe I'll go write a poem now and publish it in my little community page just to sort of tie this together. All right, everybody, have a lovely day. Bye.